Welcome to Sculpture Vulture. I'm Lucy Branch, a sculptural conservator and author, bringing you a series of interviews with some amazing sculptors who inspire me, and I hope will do the same for you. You can see the photographs accompanying the interview, the episode show notes, and get a free novel from sculpturevulture.co.uk. Hello Sculpture Vultures, and thank you for joining me. Well, I've been waiting around for jury duty this week and so got very little of interest to report back on a personal note. But how can I not comment on what's been in the news recently regarding public sculpture, particularly the verdict of the toppling of the Edward Colson statue? Can there be anyone in the whole country who doesn't understand the sentiment of the jury? Well, if there is, I've not met one. But I have to tell you, I was really surprised at the decision that they came to. It wasn't deemed criminal damage, and I totally expected that it would be. And I'm not the only one, I think, to remain conflicted about this whole topic. There's not a doubt in my mind that some sculpture needs to come down, that being definitely one of them. But I don't want decisions about my sculpture or any art, in actual fact, to be made like that statue was, in the heat of the moment, by a mob when everyone's blood is up and raging. And it's actually rage that bubbles over and explodes. And when I talked a bit about this with Hazel Reeves at the New Year, I do think contextualising some sculpture where there isn't quite such an obvious link to some aspects of history that we don't want to celebrate is part of the answer. It definitely isn't the whole answer. It doesn't go anywhere near far enough, and it just all reinforces this belief I have that we need professional curation in this sector. We need curators for public sculpture, and we have it in every other section of art, and for really good reason. I mean, if you think about any institution, they have curators, and not just a curator for the entire gallery, but in tiny niches too. And even though public sculpture isn't in a gallery, it's still a collection, and perhaps the boundaries blur more in the public domain because some sculpture is looked after by councils and others are looked after maybe by like heritage bodies, or in London we've got some of the sculpture is Department Culture, Media and Sport. But there is easily a way of introducing curation into that aspect of our public spaces, and curators, part of what they do is refreshing stock with relevant work and evaluating whether something needs to be in the same context as it previously was, and whether it could go into a different context. Maybe it should be moved into an exhibition. Maybe it could be archived. We have the technology to move public sculpture, large objects, and why sculpture isn't being treated like other types of art, I just don't understand. It's being left behind instead of being redistributed and made useful, and to show what we need in society and what we want in society. It shouldn't be getting to the stage where people are just so angry that with their bare hands, they are having to pull sculptures down because there is such a lack of change. And it worries me. Where does it stop? You've probably actually seen another article in the news this week about the bloke with a ladder, and he's outside BBC Broadcasting House in London. He climbs up and starts bashing at the Eric Gill sculptures. Now, I have been in and out of that building many times, and every single time I walk through those doors as sculptures are above them, I feel sick. We know what Gill was. We know what he did. It's undisputably hideous. And yet I can't condone this man deciding for everyone that sculpture needs to come down in that way. But we have to stop ignoring this problem, and we need to have much more thought about how public sculpture is dealt with, and make sure that people can feel that they're being listened to and that they don't need to take things into their own hands. And I think at the moment, possibly, this guy in with the Eric Gill sculptures, I think he thought, well, it's worth a try. I mean, they haven't done anything to the four who pulled down the Colson statue. It's worth a chance. Is it how we should be dealing with sculpture? Don't think so. There definitely has to be better ways. Okay, wait a minute. I just need to hop down off my soapbox. Today I'm speaking to Christine Charlesworth, who specialises in figurative sculpture and portraiture. She's an elected member of the Society of Women Artists and an elected member of the Royal British Society of Sculptors. She was one of the official artists with BT from 2010 leading up to and including the 2012 Olympics, and has far too many other awards to include here. I'm sure she won't mind me saying that she's not in her 20s anymore, but the quantity of the finest work that she is producing is quite dizzying. This year alone, she's completed public commissions for the Greta Thunberg Monument at Winchester University, Dame Ethel Smythe, the English composer and member of the women's suffrage movement, and Emily Wilding Davison, the activist and suffragette, which you'll find in Epsom. I was desperate to interview her because every one of her sculptures makes me excited. I know I always harp on about being inspired by sculpture, but her work is just the type of thing that makes me buzz. I began our conversation today by asking if she'd always been creative.
Well, you count playing with plasticine from a very, very young age, I suppose, yes. Well, my favourite lesson at school was always art. It certainly wasn't science, although I married a scientist. Yes, I suppose I have. That side of my brain has always worked better than the other side, yes.
And was there someone at home that particularly encouraged the creative part of your pursuits, the plasticine?
My mother, yes, I mean, before the war, she got into the art college in Liverpool, but then couldn't proceed any further because the war came along. So, and then she never went back to it. She didn't do anything with her talent, so it never progressed. So,
shame.
Yes.
So was art quite a big part of life at home, like entertaining you?
Yeah, it was something to keep myself occupied. Yes. My art projects were always very, very, very simple because I wasn't lucky enough to ever go to a school that was art-based. So I feel I missed out quite a lot in learning how to do things. That had to come later in life. That's what whenever I give lectures or anything, I sort of talk about transferable skills. You're learning things in life all the time and you don't actually know what's going to be transferable, but it's there, it's in you, and you pull it out as and when needed.
So when did the journey begin for you? When did you start to move towards it as a career?
My sculpture career came late in life. It's something I'd always wanted to do. I did go to art college. I went to Wolverhampton Art College, but by the time I got round to signing up to go there and they saw my portfolio, the foundation course was full, which was annoying because that's what I really wanted to do. That's what I dreamt about doing. Oh yes, I'll be able to do sculpture there. But what I didn't want to do is go to another art college and move away from home. I'd been away a boarding school that I didn't really like at all, and I didn't want to move away again. This is my time to be living back at home and going to art college. So fulfilling my mother's dream in some respects and my own. So the course, it was in the 60s, and the course they offered me, which was incredibly fashionable then, was fashion design, millinery, fashion design, and everything linked with that. So that's what I did. So here's where I start amassing the transferable skills, working out how to do patterns and things like that. It's very useful in some respects for making the molds for the sculptures that I do now. So yes, that's what I did at art college. After art college, I then did do some fashion design. I concentrated on wedding dresses and bridesmaid dresses for a very short time. Unfortunately, it's a fantastic skill to have, and I use it a lot for redesigning clothes and for doing all sorts of other things in the house. But I don't really like sewing. So I like the coming up with the ideas. And of course in the 60s, it's great with the mini skirt. So I could think in the morning, my God, I've got nothing to wear tonight. What am I going to do? And I can have a new outfit by that evening. No problem at all. Didn't even use very much material.
No, I think if you're going to be a fashion designer any time, I reckon the 60s was probably the...
Gosh, absolutely brilliant. Yes. And using curtain material with, when they had the border prints on curtain materials, that's fantastic. That's crying out for amazing dresses with, oh, yes, yes. We had great fun. But then I had to get proper jobs.
Pay the
Uh,
bills.
yes, got married and we moved away from the Midlands. We went to live in Yorkshire. All the time I'm sort of thinking, well, I'll eventually learn how to do sculpture. I'll find a class where I can learn how to do sculpture properly. We lived in Yorkshire for 6 years. Then we moved down to Devon for 16 years. In Devon, that's when we became parents. We adopted our daughter at 5 days old. And that's when I thought, right, I can give up. I'd been doing lots and lots of proper jobs, but not found anywhere to learn how to do sculpture. But I thought, right, I'd always said I'm going to do something arty-farty as soon as we have children, because then that's going to be my time. I'm going to be able to, do that. She was only 5 days old when we brought her home. So I had to immediately give up my full-time job. I was buyer and contracts controller for a building company. So I was in charge of the men in the yard. And so building skills, transferable to sculpture.
I was going to say you couldn't be better prepared, because I find that a lot, especially large scale sculpture, there seems to be a lot of men around in it, in that world. So being able to talk on a level and discuss things, especially, construction related and things, which you must have been doing.
Yeah. So it has been very useful. So yes, all good stuff. Then our daughter is learning disabled.
Right.
We didn't know when we adopted her, obviously, this was going to happen. I concentrated on learning how to do fine art when she was very young, learning how to paint. So fine art, portraiture, lots of life drawing. I went eventually, when she got a bit older, went to life drawing classes and things. So all of that is because I specialize in portraiture and figurative sculpture. That is my grounding. I can do the anatomy bit. I've got that. I can work with that now. I can go with the flow without even having a model, touch wood. Mm-hmm. So we moved when she aged 11. She needed to move to a special school. We school hunted. The best school that we found, which was very convenient for London, was just outside Guildford. And that's why we moved to Surrey. And soon after moving, probably about a year after moving, I saw that there was a course at the Adult Education Centre in Guildford on sculpture. I then had to pluck up courage to go there, and I missed 2 terms because I was frightened to sign up to it, because I wanted to do sculpture so badly, and I was frightened that my bluff was going to be called and I was going to be proved that I couldn't do it. So I went, and my first sculpture lesson was helping Carol to pug all the clay. So I didn't really do any sculpture. I was just doing I think she was testing me. Carol was my teacher. And Carol said she knew straight away that she had a student who really wanted to learn. And 90%, I would say, no, maybe 95% of the other people that were there to learn it as a hobby. So they would say to her, oh, no, don't touch this. I'm quite happy with this. And they didn't want to take it any further. Whereas Carol knew that she could have fun with me in as much as she could come up to whatever I was doing and slice off a shoulder or bend an arm or cut a face off, because she knew that if I hadn't done it right, I got the potential to work on it and I wasn't going to burst into tears. And in fact, there was one time that I was doing a reclining nude figure, and I was the first time thinking, I'm going to do this without doing any measurements of the figure I'm looking at. I'm going to do this by eye. Carol knew that I could do better. She came up to me, because it was my turn to be looked at by teacher, and she got hold of what I'd been working on, and she just mushed it up into clay. And in fact, a saying that she taught me, which I is my mantra that I tell myself, it's only clay. And it's only clay until you're 100% happy with what you've done. Otherwise, it goes back into my orange buckets and I try again. Like you slice off the face, you start again until you're absolutely, you think, at this stage, I can't do any better, or it's taking shape. Well, you could have dropped a pin in that group and it would have heard like a clang. Nobody spoke for the rest of the lesson. They were in fear that she was going to do the same to them. But of course, she wouldn't have done. She knew she could do it with me, and they couldn't understand why I wasn't really upset.
Gosh, she sounds marvellous.
She was great. And yes, I did do it much better the second time, and I didn't do any measurements. I did it by eye, and I did it much better. So she was right.
I can't remember who it is. There's someone who says, kill your darlings. But I think that's the thing, is you've got to be brave enough to edit and I think that is a distinction of a professional, isn't it? Someone who doesn't sort of crumple at that, because you nearly always can do better. Very, very rarely I think that you think, I'll never make it better again.
Yes, absolutely. But you must never ever think this is absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to progress and get any better if you ever think any of your work is like that.
Yeah.
But I must tell you what I go through each time I do a commission. I get to a stage where it's taking shape and yes, working very well. And my husband will come in and say, oh, my goodness, you've nearly finished. No, he always says that, as soon as I start putting stuff on the armature. No, go away. And I go through this stage where I have to stop myself, picking up the phone, contacting my customer and say, look, I can't do this. You're going to have to go and find a proper sculptor.
Oh, isn't that funny? But the thing is that you have to know yourself, and you clearly do.
Yes, and then I have to make myself, it's almost like being in a glass dome. I don't know, like science fiction or something, where you're in it and you're working on the sculpture and you can actually get through. You can get through the surface of what's holding you, and it's starting to take shape. How you are visualizing it in your head and you're pulling at it, and yes, it's taking shape and it's looking like what I want to represent. And yes, okay, good job I didn't phone them. I'll stick with it. That's all right.
You need someone to cut the phone line.
Yeah.
So there's no contact with the outside world allowed.
I haven't ever phoned anybody yet, so maybe I know I shouldn't, and it's just I know I'm going through the horrible time.
I think some of the greatest creatives, I mean, I think writers I know more have said that they always have that absolute doubt, that thing that says I'm not good enough, I can't do this, it's why am I torturing myself, that it's like it's part of their battle with the thing that's going to be born. There has to be a tussle. Absolutely.
And as for unveiling, when we get to the unveiling bit and we've got lots of other people that know who the person's supposed to look like, that I just want to be a million miles away, really.
Yeah, I can't imagine how hard that is. I mean, there's been a very topical statue unveiled this last week, hasn't there, with the royal family? And I think yes. I just feel like it must be the hardest thing ever to have to do that and to hear people's opinions, and people are just not necessarily kind. They feel like it's fine to tear people down, and it's painful.
Yes, absolutely.
So I love the fact that you had this sort of inner sculptor inside you years before you even began. I love the fact it was waiting in the wings for you.
Well, I was in my 40s when I was able to start sculpting.
Wow. That's just a magic kind of idea. The fact that there was this awareness, it was there, and you'd come to it at the right time, but timing was part of it.
Oh yes, it was something I had to do. I've had to do it, and I've had to be making up for lost time ever since. So, I have really been not churning them out, but it's just been... Well, it's, as my husband said, he took early retirement. He said, well, it's your turn now. It's your turn to, do what you really want to do.
Brilliant.
And he has been very supportive. Eventually, there was a time when he said, why didn't I go and get a proper job?
Yeah, well, the thing is, it is hard, I think, for those on the outside of that process to know, because so many people want to be a professional in the area they love, but how many people really do break through and are able to make money at it? It's tiny, the
It
number.
is tricky, yeah. But
So
I have been very, very amazingly lucky with the number of commissions I've been given. And of course, I've been learning as I've been working on the commissions. So I've been paid to work to learn rather than paying to learn. So, I mean, that is wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Lots of people that were willing to take the risk, really.
yeah. But I'm sure there's more to it than just them taking the risk. I think there's a lot more to it than that. But just to take you back a step, so you were talking about this self-doubt that you have. I mean, is there a creative practice or a mode of working that helps you to get into that flow, that moment where you can feel and see what you want coming out of your sculpture?
Well, first of all, I build up my sculptures from the bones,
Yeah.
got the sausages on the armature, build up, then the flesh, then the fabric on top of that. So take lots of photographs and measurements of whoever I'm doing. If I'm able to take them in their undies, that's great. Obviously, they don't necessarily have to get absolutely starkers. Certainly children not. And then if it's a costume one, putting the right laced up undies on first to hold their bodies in the right shape, and then put the clothes on top. Yes, that's fine. But what I find I always do, I know what I have to do. I know I've got to put all the work out the bones and everything. I do all the bones, I do all the measurements, I do all of that. And I seem to always do it a little bit wrong. Every time I do it a little bit wrong. And then I say to myself, you've done it wrong again. But I can see where I've gone wrong, and, back to the clay bin, maybe not all of it, but then you do it right. But why can't I? I'm sure other sculptors do it correct first time, don't they? Or is it just me?
Oh, I love that. But I mean, that's just true of life generally. I nearly always have to undo whatever I've been
Oh,
intending to
it's not
do.
just me then.
No, well, mine's not so much with sculpture, but I certainly find myself thinking, but what was I thinking when I did it like that? Whatever. Although I always say the same I say, well, I bet my husband wouldn't have done it like that, or I bet my dad wouldn't have done it like that. Everyone else does it right, apparently. So you don't have a little routine like going for a jog in the morning or warming your body up to sculpt?
No, I ought to. No, I'm old now, so I've got problem hips. So if I sit for long periods, I have to sort of, oh, ow, ow, can hardly move. I thought I was going to retire from sculpture 3.5 years ago because the pain in my hands was so great. My thumb and first finger, sometimes it goes navy blue
Oh, no.
in the gap there. It's arthritis. The doctor said, keep moving, but probably sculpture's not good. So I thought, well, okay, I might have to start being sensible and give it up. And of course, then I was contacted to do the Emily Wilding Davison commission. It took them 3.5 years to raise the funds. So I thought, well, okay, I've still got to carry it. I'm involved in this, so I know I've got to lumber up and keep active and things. I do go for, if my hips are up to it, I will walk a mile before breakfast. So that's good. And of course, I'm standing and moving all the time when I'm sculpting. I don't sit around very much. It's boring anyway if you do that. These 3 big commissions that I've had to do during lockdown, a bit like buses, they all came at once.
You have been busy this last year or so,
Yes,
haven't you?
I know.
I mean, tell us about how you're getting that work. Are people knocking the door down, or is it a business strategy that you have?
I haven't really. I'm not very good on sort of modern media and promoting myself, so that just gets forgotten, really. I have, as I said earlier, been very, very lucky that people have seen my work and people have been coming to me, offering me commissions. And that's really all my best work, I don't mean best that I've done, but the work that I've been thrilled to get
Yeah.
has come to me.
So it's word of mouth, which is the best.
Word of mouth. Yes, I obviously hear about things because I'm in the Royal Society of Sculptors, and they sort of send details of what's out there to apply for. So I have done lots of proposals. I put myself forward for lots of work. I have failed to get quite a number of things because they haven't had enough money in the pot, or they've, I was going to say, chosen a man, but quite often that is true.
Oh, the thing is that I think that there are much less women sculptors out there as well, aren't there?
Yes, there are. Yes.
But the thing is that you seem to be sculpting lots of fantastic women, which is marvellous.
Well, it's just great to be able to concentrate this last 18 months on, yes, 3 really, really important women, including Greta.
Yes, well, Greta is, I mean, she's really taken the world by storm, I'm sure, as her sculpture will as well.
Well, yes, although I had an awful lot of flack.
Oh, really?
Yes, the people of Winchester couldn't understand why they were having a sculpture of Greta Thunberg in the town. It was never for the town. They got the wrong information. And then they were up in arms and they said they wanted to have the man that sells the big issue. Why couldn't they have a sculpture of him? What relevance was it of Greta Thunberg in the centre of Winchester? The fact that their university is the greenest in the country and that they just spent 52 million on building it, which is why they've got money in the pot to pay for the sculpture with art for the building work. A section of that was put to one side for the sculpture, and she's there, very relevant.
Just escaped people.
Yes, although people were saying that they liked the sculpture, they were sort of correcting themselves, said, we like the sculpture, but we just really don't. Why we got quite a lot of gentlemen of a certain age didn't really want to have Greta there.
It's a funny thing, though. Often I feel like sculpture is in its particular context that people don't somehow, the connection between the context is something that the everyday person misses. We look after beautiful sculptures in Warrington, which are called the Guardians, and they are a memorial to those that were killed by the IRA bombing there. So they are a really poignant memorial to those lost lives. But they are vandalized constantly, and but as soon as people know what they are for, they're horrified. I mean, the kids skateboarding along them and things, they don't know, they don't understand what the setting is, what they're for. And as soon as they do, so somehow there is something being missed in that message, that it's just an absence. And I think often that is a case with sculpture. People don't always see the connection, but then when they do see it, they're very happy to support it.
Yeah, well, with Greta, I was quite lucky with this bad press because it gave me the opportunity to do an awful lot of talking about what I was portraying when I did Greta. Because initially, the university wanted her sitting down, wearing her yellow coat, with her signboard beside her. Well, that was years ago, 3 years ago, she was doing that, and it's not relevant. She's 18 now. If she wanted to, she could go to that university. And she's done so much more since she got the courage to do that. And I say courage because I've done quite a lot of work with young people with learning disabilities because of our daughter. And Julia, although she's on the autistic spectrum, but she's also learning disabled. So she's the other end of the spectrum to Greta, who feels very strongly, and she can remember things and she can spout about them. Quite, she's got a strong voice to do that. But the in-between bit is exactly the same as our daughter has to, and quite a lot of other people on the autistic spectrum have to cope with. They hate going to new places. They hate crowds. They hate noise. They hate meeting new people. They can't give eye contact. They're very unsure of themselves. And I have portrayed all of those traits when finally I did persuade the university that the best way of portraying Greta was standing as she used to stand on a box, but with her one foot in front because she's very unsure, and her hand, although pointing, not pointing strongly. And where she's pointing, that's not where she's looking. She's looking to the side of there, and her other hand in a fist with her jumper trying to hide it. So her body language, as with, I think it's very important, all sculptures should tell a story, and you should not be able to have to look too far for that story to be told. Because the students themselves then got on their high horses and they said, well, why spend all this money on a sculpture? It wasn't a huge amount of money. The money should go to the students. But having sort of talked to the students and done an interview for the students, they're thinking a different way now. And I'm hoping that Greta will be standing there. She's called Make a Difference, and it's for students to notice and maybe notice other students who might be having problems, bring this to their attention and help other students.
Yeah.
So Greta's still going to be working, I hope, well, the statue of Greta, helping students, to enabling them to help others.
I often get this because I'm working in public spaces. I get a lot of, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. That should be going to care homes, that money that you're spending, preserving X, Y. And the problem is there is no good answer to that. There's always a 500 places that money should go to. And my conclusion is that we have to spread little bits around in all directions to make our world better. And I think, though, that these sculptures there are sculptures which are portraits just of people, but yours doesn't sound like it's actually just about Greta. There's a whole lot more there, and that's why it will mean more to the students once they embrace that, because the thing is that it is for them.
Yes, it's to show that there's a very small girl who in spite of being terrified, stood in front of thousands, met so many important people, and pushed herself beyond her limits because she felt passionate about what she was trying to get across to people. And she came out the other side, and look what she achieved. Amazing, absolutely amazing, which is why I was pleased to do the other two as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, you really can't, it's quite difficult to choose between all these magnificent women that you've got on your list. So, Christine, has it been a good career to you? Would you do it again if you had the chance over?
If I could rewind and start from when I was younger with all the knowledge that I've got as an old person, without having the pain in my hands, oh my goodness, I could create so much. It would be wonderful, absolutely wonderful to know that I've got years and years and years ahead.
And so maybe to younger sculptors, they need to invest a good portion of their time looking after their bodies, because if you want a long career and
yes,
you can't.
Although I have been very good and I have been very careful. Healthy eating, healthy lifestyle, healthy everything. But with arthritis, it just arrives.
Yeah.
But in spite of that, it's okay.
So has there been one particular sculpture that you've stood back and thought, do you know what, if I never work again, I've done it, I'm okay?
Well, this is a sort of question I'm asked quite often when I give talks and things. And I always say, well, the sculpture that I am the happiest with, because I'm giving it my all, is always the sculpture that I'm working on at that moment. Otherwise, I wouldn't be giving it 100% of myself.
Yeah.
But looking back, this last 18 months has meant very much to me. And I have been so lucky that I've had these three very important women. And I think they are, I hope there's more in the pipeline going to come. And I hope I'm going to carry on working, because I've learned to live with the pain now. Because what I tell myself now, if I'm not feeling the pain, then I'm not going to be alive. So that's fine. I'm still alive. I can still feel a bit of an ouch or more now and again. I loved doing Emily Wilding Davison. Even now, since being unveiled, she's still having flowers left beside her. People come and sit beside her and they hold her hand. I didn't expect them to hold her hand. She's gesturing, but it's also a very comfortable hand to hold. And children like her because she's at that level. They can climb on the granite bench and they can get beside her. I don't like sculptures on plinths. I have a thing against them. Having said that, the big one that's going to be unveiled, we've had to put off the unveiling. That's Dame Ethel Smythe, the composer in Woking. They haven't finished doing the building work where she's going, so that might not be unveiled until the end of next month now. Unfortunately, she's going to have to stand on a bit of a plinth to raise her up, because how she's standing with her elbow in such a position, I was worried that people might bash into her, because I had to wear a hard hat because she kept attacking me on top of my head with her elbow. And we had quite a lot of fallouts about that, because I think she was doing it on purpose.
Oh, I know, knocking some sense into you.
Yeah, trying to.
Anyway, you've been so wonderful. I would love you to be able to tell the listeners where they might be able to find out more about you.
Well, I live in Milford, which is near Godalming in Surrey. I'm lucky enough to have a studio. It's not huge. I would love to have a huge building just dedicated to me. I have the equivalent of a single car garage area. That is my studio. So when I did Dame Ethel Smythe, she was floor to ceiling.
I was going to say, how on earth did you fit her in? She's huge.
Yes, I'm very pleased that I was, because of lockdown and everything, I didn't have to go and find another premises. So it was great. Just walk out the kitchen door, just across a small gravel area, and there is my studio. I can be waved at if teas and coffees are ready, or called in to eat my meal, because my husband was the chief. Because of lockdown, he had to go and get all the food and everything. But they can find me near Godalming. Did you want my address?
If you have got a website, that would be wonderful.
Yes, I have got a website. It's www, whatever you have to put, Christine Charlesworth
.co.uk, I think.
Yes, thank you. Having a mental
I know it very well, but just for the listeners. And have you got a social media that you like if people want to contact you?
I'm quite happy for people to send me emails.
Brilliant.
I always check my emails. It's christine.charlesworth@btinternet.com.
Very good. Thank you ever so much for taking the time today, Christine. I really appreciate it.
Okay, it's been great talking to you.
Christine's history is a fascinating one, particularly the sense that throughout her whole career in construction, she had that creative part of herself waiting in the wings. And when she was almost ready to give it its big moment, her nerve almost failed her. She was so sure that this part of her existed, and then she started to doubt it. What if she'd imagined everything? And despite the fact that she did push past those fears, this phantom doubt has been Christine's companion ever since, even though now she's a successful professional. She's learned that it's all part of her process. She says with every commission she does, comes a point where she has to stop herself, picking up the telephone and saying, "You'll have to find a proper sculptor," to her client. And I can really sympathise with this imposter syndrome that arises, this awful self-doubt which laps at your ankles, particularly in the early stages of projects. I'm not sure it happens to everyone, but those of us who do suffer with it have to begin to recognise the cut of its jib and sort of sidle past it. It's no good expecting it to just go away. And for Christine, it begins with the same routine that always happens at the beginning. She always does something just a little bit wrong, she says. And gosh, I can relate to this. When I'm writing at the early stages, I have all these huge thoughts welling up in my head. This is awful. This is torture. It's not coming. Why is it fighting me? I'm no good. Every tiny bit of doubt that exists in my body wants to voice its opinion at that point. And I am beginning now, fifth novel on the way, I'm beginning to be less freaked out by it. And I recognise what it is, just as Christine does. And what I try to say to myself is, actually, this just means that I'm approaching the good part. It's reassuring to hear all these doubts because I know what's coming after. And so even though it's uncomfortable, it's kind of a signpost. Now, Christine says she's not very good at promoting herself. And particularly this year, she says that a lot of the commissions that have come her way happened without the usual rigmarole that can be involved. But I thought it was really interesting and relevant that she's put herself forward for so many things and done so many proposals, which she says, in a very self-depreciating way, she hasn't got. I don't see her pitches at all as a waste of time. I'm sure that every single proposal she's done or person she's come into contact with she's made an impression on, and that has then served her in some way down the line. And every business involves a certain amount of doing things for free, and in particular pitching can be very time consuming, but I never see it as a waste of time because if nothing else, it prepares you for those times, those moments when the gods of the projects do smile on you, and it gets you in the right frame of mind, kind of like going for a jog rather than, actually competing in a race. It is, unfortunately, the burden of a creative to have to also tell the universe that they want to sell their work. We have to be an artist and a business person, all rolled into one. And Christine's busy docket of fantastic monuments tells us that there is more than one way to reach success. She has made the world sit up and listen, even though she hasn't necessarily jostled and hustled for it. Please support the show in one of three ways. By buying one of my novels, you're going to love them. They're all about sculpture. Or by rating the show on any of the apps that you listen to. And the final way that you can help me out is by telling someone about the show. Everyone I've come across who's listened to the show has been so kind about it, and we want to spread the word. We want to get these interviews out to as many people as possible and get them thinking about their wonderful sculpture in public places. So please don't think it's unimportant to do it that way. It's so important, and I really appreciate it. Join me next week for a discussion about protective coatings and advice about maintenance. It's a question I get all the time, and I hope it will be useful to you. Definitely not as inspiring as the fantastic speaker I've had today, Christine, but hopefully going to be practical and useful, which will definitely be worth listening to. If you're looking for a new book, please consider one of my novels about the dark side of the art world, where sculpture is always at the heart of the story. You can get them on the show website, on the usual online retailers, or even better, keep your local library alive, ask for them in there. Thank you for joining me today. Sculpture Vulture has been brought to you by Antique Bronze.